Today for this exciting webinar, Advancing Local Manufacturing for E-Mobility's Future. The session is starting now on the 7th of July. We're very excited to have you on board. I see people are still streaming in. Now, if you have an opportunity, please type in the chat section your name, your organization, and where you're joining us from, so that we can have a bit of interaction and understand who's in the room as we go along the discussion. I'm very happy to see that so many people are joining right now, about 50 people, with a packed agenda that's going to be very new for the continent in terms of exploring not just e-mobility, but value addition and local value chain building in the e-mobility space. My name is Warren Ondanje, and I'll be your moderator for the day. We have an exciting agenda, and before we move forward, I'd like to pass hearty and very deep appreciation to the supporters of this webinar and those who made it possible today, and that is African Mobility Alliance, AFEMA, our very close partners, GIZ, work with GIZ in Kenya, very closely to have this webinar full of content and relevance for you, and with the support of EKI, on an exciting project that we'll also get to mention as we go along. So as you join, once again, please type in your name and chat in the chat section. I'm hoping the chat section is open now. And yeah, our backend team can confirm that. The topics and some of the thematic areas we'll be exploring today in this webinar include how Africa can embrace e-mobility beyond importation of vehicles and into building value chains and a competitive industry. As we have seen, as you might already come across on the internet from various announcements, there's a huge amount of interest and investment that's already happening on the continent, starting from light-duty vehicles, 2- and 3-wheelers, medium-duty vehicles, all the way to heavy-duty vehicles. We've now seen trucks being brought into the continent. But now this has primarily been through an importation model. And today we'll be starting to answer and explore the question of how we move beyond importation and into assembly and manufacturing. The next question or point on why this is important for us to explore this: e-mobility represents a new opportunity on a couple of fronts. This is a technology that consumes electricity, and therefore these are locally generated resources on the continent. So we have a chance to reduce dependence on importation of fossil fuels. E-mobility, given that it's starting out all across the world, is an opportunity for Africa to jump ahead and be toe-to-toe with the rest of global development on the automotive value chain in terms of creating jobs locally, moving into value addition through assembly and manufacturing, becoming a competitive market, because the products that are being produced today in the continent are really meant to be used and applied on the continent. But also there could be a growing opportunity in exporting some of the technology that could be assembled and manufactured on the continent. And finally, or second to last, is regional and economic integration, but also shortening our supply chains. Now, there could be a regional discussion on production or specialization of various component manufacturing across the different African regions, from East Africa, producing certain parts and collaborating with West Africa for other parts, and even Southern Africa, to create this continental value chain that still works under for example, the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. So this is important for us to start the discussion today because of the imminent opportunity in capturing value. The next question is, where will this value be created? So we are starting with vehicle imports. What is the next big opportunity? Already, you might have seen news and announcements around vehicle assembly. You might have heard about battery production, charging infrastructure becoming assembled and progressively manufactured on the continent. Certainly, energy production is happening on the continent. But then could there be other skills, both new or borrowed from adjacent industries, such as the energy storage industry, the traditional automotive space, because there are parts that e-mobility shares very much with the ICE value chain that could still be exploited further to grow the e-mobility chain. So these are just to get the momentum going and get some questions popping in your head. Please type in the chat section if you have, if you've joined us and where you're joining us from. We're excited to have a packed panel, but as we go to the next slide, I'd like to first highlight who these speakers are going to be for us today. And in no particular order, I'll mention Engineer Eric Kadegerwa, who is the Head of Transport and Mobility Division at the Africa Union Commission. So thank you for joining us, Engineer Eric. We have Cynthia Kipsang for joining us from GIZ Kenya, and she's a Junior Technical Advisor for Sustainable Mobility. From Kenya Ministry of Investment, Trade and Industry, we have Professor Erastus Gatebe, who is the Industrialization Secretary at the State Department of Industry. And from Setud, all the way in Senegal, we're joined by Mamadou Diaye, who's joining as the e-mobility project manager. And last but not least is Engineer Robert Njoroge from GIZ Kenya, and who's also a technical advisor. Over this next hour and 53 minutes, the agenda looks like this. After my opening remarks, we'll get to hear a bit about the topic and setting the scene by Engineer Robert Njoroge. We'll hear a little bit more zoomed out at the continental perspective from Engineer Eric, who will talk to us about the continental perspective for this value addition for e-mobility. Then we'll dive down into Kenya to understand a little bit more about what is a national policy perspective like from a government representative. And thank you for joining us, Professor Gatebe. Then we'll hear from industry and regional perspectives from Mamadou Ndiaye from Setud. In Senegal, there's a massive BRT project that's all electrified, and some of these insights will come up. And then Cynthia will take us through a moderated discussion, a Q&A. So please keep on posting your questions. Use the Q&A section to continue accumulating any questions that come to mind, because that's when we'll now come back and reflect on those, and then we'll close this webinar. So without further ado, I'll now hand it over to Robert. Robert will have the next 15 or so minutes to set the scene, and then we can get going with the next presentation. Welcome, Engineer Robert.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Warren. I hope you are able to hear me and you are able to also see my screen, what I'm presenting. Please confirm.
Correct. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Warren, for that great introduction. My name is Robert Njoroge, a technical advisor at GIZ, and in this conversation, we want to understand how we can be able to build ecosystems, regional value chains, and the industrial capabilities, looking at how Africa can leverage its advantages in building a great ecosystem for e-mobility. So I think the fundamental question right now, and what as a continent we're looking at, is that the transport sector is undergoing an industrial revolution, something that hasn't happened in over a century. And right now the question is, can Africa move beyond being a primary importer towards being part of the conversation and actually benefiting the most in terms of this revolution. So from the initial phase, there was a lot of adoption. In the past 5 years or so, a lot of focus went to adoption, which is rightly so, because at the end of the day, we needed to also see these components and also companies who are actually sort of proving concepts. But now the question in which
Robert, just a moment. I see you're
yes.
proceeding with the slide, but seems like it's frozen midway between the first and the second. Oh, now it's clear. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Yeah, so countries are now discussing about industrialization. Where can we get these jobs? How can we add value? And to be honest, how can we benefit as much as possible without just being a continent that adopts and imports finished products. So that's where we are at now. The question of how can we industrialize? And I think this webinar is critical because this is at that point where we need to also understand our strengths, not looking at value adding everything and actually countries thinking that they can do everything, but also looking inwardly into how can we leverage regional frameworks, how can we complement each other in terms of our strengths. So ideally, once we do that, the next phase is now as a whole, how can Africa be competitive in terms of manufacturing? That is Africa being an exporter of components that have been manufactured in the continent to other regions in the world, and that's the best way how we can be able to benefit from this transition. So as I said, e-mobility is not only a transport transition. So primarily, it's been focused on CO2 reduction in the initial phases, but we can learn a lot of lessons from countries such as India, where they've moved from a transport solution and a transport conversation into an industrial opportunity. So if you look at India, for example, they have robust policy measures that promote their industrial sector. They are building a good manufacturing ecosystem, and I think that that's a good area where African countries and Africa as a whole can understand and be able to reap the most. So in terms of the local manufacturing aspect, we need to move beyond importing finished products. As I showed in my first slide, the initial phase was like having the components in the continent, but now we need to move beyond that. We've already seen that the components or e-mobility works. Now the question is, how can we move beyond importing 2 and 3-wheelers and localizing a lot of value in the 2 and 3-wheelers, in the bus segment, in the light duty vehicle segment? Industrial development. So we need to build capabilities in assembly, components, software maintenance. So in this particular revolution that we're calling the industrial opportunity, there are other subsectors which are going to come up, which primarily I think it's easy to look at things like batteries, but look at software. Like there's a lot of skills in IT, there's a lot of skills in maintenance. So beyond the general components that we see in terms of e-mobility, there are other sectors in which we can be able to leverage and reap benefits, such as component assembly and manufacturing. Then also another pillar that can be able to support this is reduction of dependence on fossil fuels. So we import a lot of finished and already processed fossil fuels, and we use a lot of foreign exchange in this import. So how can we leverage the renewable energy that we have, be able to strengthen the domestic value chains, and ideally, as the last pillar, is to be able to be regional competitive. So I'll highlight a few factors in which, as Africa, we have critical advantages and where we can be able to look and be able to maximize. So I believe the conversation of critical minerals is said in different conversations, but do we really understand what this means beyond knowing that these critical minerals are actually probably used for battery assembly? So I'll highlight something interesting about critical minerals beyond battery assembly. They are used in all, if not all, the new technologies that are coming up. For example, in the electrification space, some of these critical minerals are highly in demand. Wind turbine production, you have some of these minerals which ordinarily, when we look at it, everyone, if not all of us, usually just look at battery assembly. But even in component manufacturing, wind power system manufacturing, critical minerals are important. And day by day, these minerals, their demand is growing. But also, I'd also like to highlight something that's interesting, is that it's not that Africa is the only continent with these critical minerals. So for us, what we need to do is to exploit our minerals ourselves, create value, and actually value add before exporting. Knowing that we have the critical minerals is not enough, but what can we do with the minerals once we are able to start mining and identifying actually which sectors can create most value in terms of finance? The other advantage we have as a continent is the robust, already functioning automotive industry that is there. If you look at South Africa, for example, already it has an established manufacturing base. South Africa manufactures a lot of vehicles and exports to Europe, same as Morocco, which has also a good automotive sector. We have other countries which are expanding and emerging. We have Ethiopia, we have Kenya, which is really advancing in terms of innovation in the e-mobility space. We have Nigeria, Ghana, Tunisia, Algeria, and Egypt. So all in all, this picture depicts something critical. We are not starting from nowhere. Actually, different countries have already understood different strengths, and that's where we can be able to scale up for the countries already which have a robust automotive manufacturing base. But ideally, we need now to transition. So for example, if a country already understands and has a good value chain in the ICE industry, it is easy. It can be a low-hanging fruit in terms of trying and figuring out how to convert those or set aside a certain share of assembly for electric mobility manufacturing to export to already established markets, and for the countries which haven't yet started manufacturing and are looking into, this is the right time in terms of getting the technology right and not actually going into a sector, for example, the ICE sector, which is right now being phased out. Another critical advantage that we have as a continent is the renewable energy potential. I think this is an easy win for us as a continent. If you look at the solar potential that we have is immense. We receive a lot of daylight, a lot of sun hours during the day. If you look at the geothermal potential that we have, which spans a couple of countries in the Great Rift Valley region. Kenya, being one of the countries, has a potential of more than 10 gigawatts in terms of geothermal potential. Look at hydro. We have Congo, which has the Congo River, which can be able to do almost 40 gigawatts. Zambezi can do up to 20 gigawatts. Where Cameroon, there's potential for a river there which can do 12.6 gigawatts. And the Nile River, I think the longest river, has a potential of 140 gigawatts. What does this say in terms of the potential is that we can power our own continent even export excess power. So this is an area where we have that competitive advantage. Then it goes without saying, we are a young population. 60% of the of Africans are under 25, and also there's a statistic which says by 2050, 1 in every 4 people will be an African. So that is a metric that is heavy, but also for us, if we use it competitively, we have the workforce, we have the renewable energy potential, we have the skills, we can be able to leapfrog into this new technology and reap benefits. But it's good to just point out, e-mobility and manufacturing is not just about building factories. A factory is an outcome of a system, of an ecosystem, not the starting point. So you do not build a factory, then wait for all the enabling environment factors to come on board. What happens is we create the enabling environment, then that's when we can build the factory. And if you listen to how investors look for areas for investing, they look at the policy environment, they look at whether there's skilled workforce, they look at the energy infrastructure. So if you look at all the pillars which are encompassing e-mobility manufacturing, then we need to get them right before we start building these factories. But also, it's good to also understand what can we do in the near term and what can we do in the long term. In the near term, what we can be able to leverage on is vehicle assembly. Already there's a lot of vehicle assembly happening in the continent, in the bus segment, motorcycle, three-wheelers, and also in the heavy goods vehicles, charging ecosystem, services, components. In the long term, we can go into advanced electronics, battery recycling, semiconductor-related components. But also, I'd like to point out one thing. It does not mean that all countries need to manufacture everything. So, for example, we have countries in the continent which already have a robust light-duty vehicle ecosystem. They can continue with that. We can have regional frameworks where they produce, for example, light-duty vehicles, then other countries in other regions produce 2- and 3-wheelers, and others produce buses and heavy goods vehicles, charging infrastructure, and the likes. And also for the countries which already have these minerals for, let's say, battery assembly, for battery manufacturing, they can go into that as well. So what we're trying to build is an ecosystem, not individual countries manufacturing everything, because at the end of the day, we also need to create a market. And that takes me to the next slide, which talks about our biggest constraints, which is scaling of the market. So if you look at that individual mindset that I've mentioned, it cannot lead us anywhere, because if we have fragmented standards, different policies, limited demand, we'll have duplicated investments where everyone is producing, but there's nobody to buy. So the solution to that is creating a larger demand. For example, in East Africa, we are, like if you look at the individual countries, we are countries of, let's say, 50 million and the likes in terms of population, but in the whole East African region, we can create a demand of over 300 million individuals in that particular market. So it's that that consolidated demand that we are looking for and being able to benefit from each other. This brings me to one of the projects which has identified that crucial aspect, which GIZ is supporting in collaboration with UNEP, Agora Vende, which is a German think tank, Africa E-Mobility Alliance, CETUD, and TIPS, which are also regional think tanks. And in this project, basically, we are trying to look at different regions in Africa. So, for example, Kenya is in the East African in the East African region, South Africa in the Southern African region, and Senegal in the East African region. So what we're trying to do is to create an ecosystem of frameworks which can be able to lead into regional frameworks to support e-mobility manufacturing. So for example, we'll support evidence-informed policy recommendation for industrial planning, standards development, feasibility studies for manufacturing, market assessments, and the likes. This project is about to commence. It's being supported by the German government and in the International Climate Initiative, and the country partners, as I've mentioned, Kenya, Senegal, and South Africa. The project itself has 5 outputs. The first output focuses on the countries in the regions, that's Kenya, Senegal, and South Africa, in creating these national frameworks. Then there's output 2, which focuses on advancing job opportunities for women in mobility. Also, it's good to highlight that as we transition in this sector and in most of these upcoming opportunities, women are a crucial conversation in any form of development, given that they are also part of the workforce and we need to create an equal opportunity. So for this transition, women are critical, and we need to also look into how can we advance job opportunities and create a level playing field for both men and women. Then there's output 3, which now focuses on the think tanks, where we'll be able to develop these think tanks into autonomous bodies which can be able to advise government in terms of e-mobility once the project ends, and countries in Africa can have this resource in terms of knowledge that has been left in the continent, that we're doing in collaboration with Agora, which is from Germany. Then output 4 will focus on the regional frameworks, EAC, ECOWAS, and SADC for the South African region, creating what I've been really emphasizing on in terms of those regional policies which support trade and investment. And finally, output 5, which now which will focus on the AU level. As I conclude, what needs to happen next? I think I've sort of touched upon all of these things, but I'll start with number 5, which is really key, and I am happy that we have representation from African Union, because this regional collaboration, what LEAP is working on, what I've talked about, that regional focus, that is the key to our strength. So the Africa Free Trade Continental Agreement, knowledge sharing, these value chains that we keep talking about, understanding, assessing what other countries have in terms of the advantages, will really help us strengthen that regional collaboration. Skills, goes without saying, all these this sector needs a lot of skilling, because now we are going into an area where originally originally we were in the ICE market. Right now we're going to the e-mobility market. So we need to upskill ourselves towards this particular new technology. Then investment. This is really key. For e-mobility to take off, we need to mobilize capital, blended finance, SME support. We need to talk to development partners, banks, and show them that this concept is ready, Africa is ready, and there is enough demand to be able to grow this market, not just adopting and importing finished products, but to manufacture. Then harmonizing standards goes as well with the regional focus. And this, I will cream it off with policy certainty. We need to create policies that are certain, that will not always shift the goalpost, but they need also to be flexible enough to also answer to market demand. And with that, Warren, I am done. I hope I didn't go so much over time. Thank you.
Thanks, Robert. And for that very in-depth presentation, you're just a little bit over time, but that's okay. I think the content you've shared is what matters the most. The key takeaways I've seen, we need policy certainty, standards, investments, skills, and regional collaboration. And this is a good point to now shift to the next speaker, who's Engineer Dagegerwa from the African Union Commission. engineer is going to give us an overview of the continental perspective. There's some exciting developments happening at the continental level. So without further ado, Engineer Eric, please go ahead. You have 15 minutes, and I'll signal to you once you have maybe 2 or 3 minutes left.
Thank you so much, Brother Warren. I'm happy to be with you. Thank you for the invitation. I hope you can see me on my screen.
Yes, I can. Thank you.
So I kindly request our colleagues to share the presentation. Yvonne. Thank you very much. First of all, let me introduce myself. I'm Eric Nagengerwa, Head of Transport and Mobility Division at the African Union Commission. I'm here with my colleagues in the Division of Transport and Mobility, Dr. Jovin, Jonas, Bekele. I'm also with Godwin, all working under the various sectors of road transport, but also touching e-mobility in various aspects. I'm also here representing the 2 important partners we worked on developing a continental framework on electric that is UNEP. I worked with UNEP and UNECA to develop a continental framework. Of course, AFEMA is our key partner as well, as we also prepare the Africa E-Mobility Week in a few coming months, I think September. And we'll be happy to also welcome all other partners, especially our partner GIZ, who has been supporting us in various ways. We are really grateful for that. Next slide. So I will talk a bit about this continental EV framework based on some assessment done jointly by UNEP and UNECA in terms of the electric vehicles development in Africa, and also talk about the objectives and the essence why we decided to develop this continental framework, talk about the recommendations of this assessment and the framework in general, and then talk about the ministers of transport and energy who met in their specialized technical committee held in April 2026 in Johannesburg and adopted this continental framework. Next. Just briefly, in line with what my predecessor, my brother from Kenya, mentioned about the EV general in Africa. So we see some disparities and countries at the different paces when it comes to developing their EV policies. We see countries that have already developed fully operational policies, about 14%, 22% still developing, and 16% still not having any policy. And we have countries that are spearheading in this important sector: South Africa, Morocco, Ethiopia, Rwanda, Kenya, and Nigeria. And we see this in numbers of vehicles, light duty vehicles. We also see 3-wheelers and 2-wheelers vehicles in indicated numbers. And we also see countries which don't have currently data in terms of the EVs. So one of the things the continental framework is intended to do is to try to push and support in whichever ways those countries that are already doing well, and try to develop a data system and a continental data framework architecture that will help those who have no information and who have not yet developed their policies to do so. Next. So we see different drivers of the electric vehicles development in Africa. We have commercial vehicles with high proportion of commercial in Africa's vehicle fleets and low personal vehicle ownership. We have attractiveness of economically attractive sector with a business case. I think this will being one of the reasons that we saw that Africa having a lot of natural resources. So there is a potential and possibility to manufacture, assemble, having a very young population, being able to get to create a lot of jobs in terms of EV, having local potentials in terms of a possibility to transition to sustainable mobility, EV adoption, and considering countries' resource endowment and alignment with investments and renewable power generation. Here, I can mention that as my the previous presenter mentioned, the African Continental Free Trade Area, providing that continental framework to be able to have that capacity for the Africa countries to trade and do business between themselves, and also develop local manufacturing capacity is very critical. Suitability, it's shifting to electric mobility is particularly suitable for region where renewable energy such as hydroelectric, wind, solar is primary electricity source. At continental level, we have a lot of programs in this sense. We have a continental renewable energy strategy. We have African single electricity market, which is under implementation. And we have a lot of renewable energy sources in the continent, being at regional level, for example, Eastern Africa level, but also at country level. So those are also the opportunities. The countries with less clean power grids will also immediately benefit from efficiency gains and air pollutants. Next slide, please. So why did we go for this continental framework? So the first objective is to look at the what is being done elsewhere, globally. For example, we are already benchmarking and working with the Nordic countries, Norway and the other Nordic countries, to see how did they go through developing their EV sector. But the first objective is to try widespread EV adoption in Africa, fostering innovation, promoting the use of renewable energy, and ensuring equitable access to EV technologies. The second, accelerate transition to sustainable mobility, foster regional cooperation, and standardize practices across Africa. So in this sense, we are also working on various sectors of harmonizing road transport. For example, we have a program to harmonize continental road transport instruments. And when we see this, we see a lot of potential and opportunity that if we transition to sustainable mobility, we are able to quickly, bring that efficiency, harmonization, and try to also address issues of cross-border operations. Number 3, increase the local value added and critical minerals on the continent. We have, for example, African commodity strategy, which spreads out how the continent is rich in terms of the resources, mineral resources. So it's good to bring together local manufacturing companies and the potentials that we have in various African countries. Next. So the continental framework, which was developed, as I said, in collaboration with UNECA and UNEP, had recommended various aspects. So here I just made a bit of a summary. But one of the things that these ministers recommended under this framework is that member states, as I said, member states are in various capacity in terms of adopting and implementing some EVs, but we wanted some harmony and some, strong voice, and putting together what we can and coordinating with all the partners, because we have various partners interested, but if without a coordinated framework, we cannot achieve much. So the first thing that member states were requested is to promote local manufacturing and regional value chains. As I said, this is in line with the African Continental Free Trade Area, which, for example, promotes issues of movement of professional services. So we can have people working in one region on this manufacturing, and they are able to be licensed and work elsewhere within Africa. And African countries can also share or transfer among themselves the skills to be able to promote this local manufacturing. Number two, accelerating infrastructure and energy system readiness, providing innovative fiscal incentives for EV transition, financing programs for EV introduction. Member states are also requested to have some public awareness and education, research, development, and innovation, and formulate supply-side regulations. These are the key areas that the continental framework is looking at, and together with regional economic communities, our partners, we need to promote and support our member states. On the side of the RECs and also the key partners, number one is to promote local manufacturing and regional value chains. As I said, we already have countries that are spearheading this. So there is a possibility that we can have some of the regional hubs or even, let's say, even centers of excellence when it comes to promoting and local manufacturing, accelerating infrastructure and energy system readiness, providing innovative fiscal incentives for EV transition, financing programs for EV introduction and upscaling, and public awareness and education. So those are the critical elements that the regional economic communities and partners, AUC, ECA, FDB, AFEMA, and others we can work on. And the way we want to do it, after the ministers adopted the framework, we want to do it in a coordinated way so that we have the different pillars within the framework, and we have a pillar lead in terms of spearheading this. For example, if we have AFEMA working on public awareness and education as an example, then AFEMA can be able to coordinate all the other actors into this. When we have, for example, financing programs for EV introduction, probably we adopt African Development Bank as a key partner, but we also have a Flexing Bank who is working on this. So in each pillar, we can have a pillar lead and a coordinated approach, but AUC together with UNEP and UNECA having that overall coordination. Then we have, for example, issues of fiscal incentives and EV transition. We know that countries are doing this, but maybe together with the regional economic communities, how can we adopt some regional mechanism to be able to accelerate these fiscal incentives, accelerating infrastructure and energy system readiness, the issues of, for example, the charging infrastructure, the private sector around this. How can we have this? For example, we can agree, we want to agree, maybe UNEP can spearhead this particular aspect on infrastructure. So in each of these pillars, we are working on, and from the strategy adopted this year in April, we are able to have a roadmap for the next years to be able to achieve some of these. And my colleague mentioned about regulatory framework already under the African Union Commission. As I said, we are touching some elements of regulatory instruments, and one of them will also touch on EVs regulations and standards. Of course, we also have to work with Africa Standardization Organization to be able to adopt these standards. Next slide, please. So the ministers in April 2026 in Johannesburg adopted this continental framework on electric mobility, requested AUC and ECA in collaboration with African member state governments and relevant institutions to establish a data collection system to monitor the progress of EV adoption. So as I said, the data collection and data infrastructure is going to be critical for us to know what is the status as we build the regulatory system, as we build the capacity for local manufacturing, as we support countries in putting together these financial incentives. How are we monitoring the progress? So this is going to be critical. Recommendation 3 from the ministers is the national and regional standard organizations with support from UNEP and UNECA. Align, monitor, and enforce compliance and ensure adherence to international best practices and standards on EVs. And last but not least, encourage member states to develop regularly review and update EV roadmaps and policies. As I conclude, so this is an opportunity to call upon all private sector African member states and our key partners to really implement our continental framework. I know that countries, as I said, are doing a lot in terms of this, but we believe that sharing best practices, coming together to adopt regional regulations, frameworks, sharing experiences, and be able to advance without any country left behind, I think it's going to be critical. And AUC stands ready to support this continental framework. And once again, I thank FEMA for putting this webinar together, and we look forward to more opportunities to discuss this topic. I thank you very much, and look forward to the discussion. Thank you, Warren, and back to you.
Thank you very much, Engineer Eric. And this for this overall continental perspective of where the continental framework is, and it's now there to guide the continent. So this is again a very positive development, and for the first time, also very early in the e-mobility development, we have a continental framework. So if anyone is still interested in reading up a bit more or getting in touch with you, Eric, please again write to us. We're happy to facilitate these engagements. But it's really an honor to see that now we have a continental direction on matters of encouraging e-mobility, which again encompasses the same topic we're talking about, local manufacturing and value chains, together with other elements like financing, regional cooperation. So this is very timely. I'll move on to the next speaker, and this is now to zoom in a little bit to get a national perspective on policies around industrialization. Professor Erastus Getebe will be our next speaker, and he'll be addressing the topic of national industrialization priorities, enabling policies and opportunities for local manufacturing. Professor Getebe, please take it away. You have 15 minutes, and I'll also try and signal you when you're 3 or 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you, Warren. Good morning, colleagues. I want to land on what my colleagues have just presented. I want to thank GIZ as well as our African Union colleague. My name, as mentioned, I'm Professor Getebe. I'm the Industrialization Secretary, State Department for Industry, under the Ministry of Trade, Investment and Industry. I think we have gone through the global perspective from GIZ. Then we have looked at as a continent, what are we doing? And thank you, our colleague, for that good work. I think I'll take you through my presentation, which is basically now local, so that our colleague from outside the continent can see what at a national level what we are doing. I hope I can my presentation can be. We can move to the next slide. Or I upload.
Yes, sir, are you able to share your presentation, please?
I did share. I shared. Or I can share from my end.
Yes, you're able to share from your end.
Okay, just a second. Okay, thank you. Can you see the presentation?
Yeah, it's visible.
It's visible. Okay, thank you. Looking at the national policy perspective, basically for all the governments within the continent, we look at the legislative agenda as basically a scheduled way of doing things, and more so in terms of I think it has disappeared.
Professor Getebe, but yes, we can see the next slide. It's on national policy perspective.
Oh, okay. I can't see it from my end. Okay.
Oh, Okay, just proceed, but then I'll let you know, or you can let us know once you're done with the presentation. But I can see the slide.
Can see it from your end.
Yep.
Okay, fine. What I was saying is the industrial national policy perspective basically is important in guiding what exactly my colleagues previously or speakers have said, that we normally look at these aspects in terms of how, where, and to make it possible to implement. As was mentioned earlier, there is always a fragmented way of looking at the policies, and it is not unique to Kenya. It is unique to most countries, especially under our umbrella of AFCFTA. So, as a country, what we have decided, or we have is a whole of government approach, where we look at the socio-economic development underlying this perspective. In a nutshell, this is why are we looking at e-mobility. I think we have been given a very good way of why we need this, but looking at what has been happening, and especially looking at the sustainable development goals, SDGs, as well as what is happening in the area of climate change. This is basically another way of making our life better, meaning we are looking at transformative shift globally, of course, with their significance on sustainability of eco-friendly transportation, as was mentioned earlier. Kenya also see in its own as a jurisdiction seek to abate our greenhouse gases emission by about 32% in the next to be by 2030. And of course, avoid the business as usual, where our scenario has been about 143 metric ton CO2 equivalent, and of course, which is in line with our vision. We also have a vision 2030, which is ending in the next 4 years, and by then we also need to transform our, then the Kenyans, because it was mentioned earlier, the continent, Kenya not excluded, we have a very vibrant young stars who are well educated, and we need to provide them with meaningful jobs, and these meaningful jobs can only come from industrialization. Of course, it also improved the local innovation, especially in part manufacturing. But when you look at that, there one aspect that always come up. Why are we doing that? We look at that based on the mandates of various government agencies, State Department, and the ministries. In this case, our ministry under the industry, these are some of the issues that we look at, and I don't want to go through them, but you can see the first one is always industrial policy and planning, and we have been informed that one of the major bottlenecks is lack of coherent policy and planning. And I think as ministries across Africa, if you're under industry, that is very key in order to give policy sustainability as well as policy coherence, giving confidence that what you have is there. We are, in the same way, we look at it from what is your mandate, one of the Kenyan mandate, and that is where the local productions comes in. Is like in our ministry, is Buy Kenya, Build Kenya policy and strategy, which are already there. We had to develop them so that they can learn coherently with these other policies. Of course, one other issue that has come up, and which is a challenge within the continent, is the issues of standardization and quality. The ministry is responsible through the State Department for Industry for promoting the standardization. And as was mentioned by our African Union colleague, the African Standard Organization must sit down and come up with a harmonized system, because it's out of this that we are able to make it right. We also look at the property rights, of course, because if you have to do production, manufacturing, we have to also assure that some of these are also protected. And more so is also to promote the oversight of the whole sector. Of course, these are some of the other things. But one thing I want to mention, and our mandate is the oversight, administration, and enforcement of the content. Because if you have, as mentioned by Robert, we have a lot of minerals, but what is the input from the African perspective? What are we giving out there? When we come up with the batteries, when we come with the part manufacturing, what is local content? So as African continent, or as a state department, in this case in Kenya, our main aim is also to look at that we have local content in the policies as well as in the product covered and captured. So in line with that, the government e-mobility milestone has been on a roller coaster. We have been learning this since the current government came into power. One of the things that was put into bigger perspective is, of course, how to roll out the e-mobility. And we have had a few of their milestones. Of course, this is based on our government legislative agenda, which from 23 to 28 is a 5-year cycle. That is how we normally plan as mostly in the whole of continent. And based on that, we made sure that the sessional paper number 2, which was passed in the same year in 2022, has been operationalized. So we have then the passage of the national industrialisation, or policy on automotive. Because without a policy on automotive, then you can't even talk of e-mobility or any other type of mobility, especially in this sector. So we have an automotive policy, which we are basically utilizing in terms of fostering this sector. I also want to say that we also, as a government, launched the development of the National Electric Mobility Policy, and this was launched a couple of months ago, to be specific, on 3rd of February. This policy is the one that have given the country the direction on what needs to be done on e-mobility. So the National Electric Mobility Policy has come up with 4 technical teams, and this week I think they are meeting somewhere outside Nairobi, looking at how do we implement these thematic areas as mentioned from the previous presenters. And one of them, under technical, we have about 5 committees. And one of the areas they are looking at, what are the policy, legal, and regulatory framework that need to be amended, and that what needs to be done. This is captured within our electric mobility policy, and it talks about, and it's the state department responsible is transport, all the way to 5 fiscal and non-fiscal measures, because we need to give incentives, we need to give waivers, we need to make it easier for investors, for manufacturers, and for OEMs to come in and have a pie within the country. And these are there just to make sure it is we can give that. As a ministry, ours is local manufacturing assembling, which is under policy objective 2. So if you look at that, it covers all others, basically lead into that. More important, we have just completed the automotive industry bill, which will capture all these policies, the national automotive policy as well as the national electric mobility policy, among others, into one. And that bill is at the cabinet level. So we expect before the end of the year, we'll have law to operationalize the policies. And what are we doing as a government in order to spearhead this? As was mentioned by Robert, I think one of the areas that we are looking into to address some of the challenges, as he mentioned, is through the RIPO project. We are one of the partner states together with Senegal as well as South Africa, and we look forward as the project starts this month, then we'll be able to address some of the challenges that we have identified in our e-mobility initiatives. The National Automotive Sector Development Project, this one is a facility the government has negotiated with the government of Japan, And this project just started last month. The president actually, the signing and the launch was done 2 weeks ago. And out of this, the government has committed approximately 13 billion Kenya shilling in the next 3 years to look at the whole automotive sector, because we look at from the current mobility to the moving forward to the e-mobility, among others, which of course we know why we are promoting ourselves to that line. Other initiative as a government we have been looking at is promoting green investment and of course circular economy. These are some of the engagement we have with our colleagues from UNIDO, and I'm happy they are in the webinar. What as a government, which happens across the continent, what are some of our key challenges? As was mentioned by the previous speakers, capacity and technical gaps. I think especially in the area of e-mobility, this is an area that we are addressing, and through that facility, we will also be looking at how do we empower. In fact, our cabinet has pushed that 10 technical and vocational institutions have been identified to be specific for this area, especially on technical issues, so that we are able to build that capacity and others. Of course, in countries like Kenya, where public participation is also a key area in terms of adoption of all these policies, we always have ineffective outreach because of certainly the budgetary and, as was mentioned, lack of standard. Where do we stand? For example, currently, we have the East African standards or the regulations that were to commence from this month. But during our last meeting in the TAC, we were not able to say they proceed, but as a country, of course, we are allowed to proceed. So if you look at ineffectiveness, so the standard applying in Kenya may not apply to other 7 partner states. And these are some of the issues that happens. Of course, why do that happen? Of course, it's the next step. I don't need to emphasize, because some interest say this one is going to open market for us. But we are looking at AFCFTA, and we hope that the AFCFTA will resolve some of these issues. I think one of the key area, and I'm happy it was one of them mentioned by our AUC counterpart, resource and data constraint. I think we are in the challenges of this. We really need to have this data. It is missing. I've seen here as data from less than half of the countries. That means it's an area that need to be addressed. It affects every jurisdiction, the 54 countries in the continent. In conclusion, I think as a government, which cuts across all of us, we acknowledge the challenge, especially in capacity limited participation, as well as interference and acceptance, because people always sometimes refuse these kind of new implementations of other technologies, as well as some seeing they are going to lose jobs, among others. However, the government, especially our government, the Kenyan government, remain committed to the legislative agenda and ensuring completion of all other. What we are doing now, we will bring after the team that is meeting have shown earlier. What we are going to have is we'll have them under one roof, so that we don't have one Ministry of Transport and the Ministry of Industry doing different things for the same cause. So that is one. That's why I had put one whole government approach, so that we don't have those kind of competing interests and doing the same thing. So by doing so, the government aims to ensure evidence-based and timely decision-making irrespective of budgetary allocations. As you are aware, one of the challenges within every government or any government is always that aspect, which is normal, because we need to generate more jobs. We need to create synergy, and we also need to empower others. And there are also competing other aspects apart from industrialization and manufacturing. We have health issues, education issues, among others. So we have to be cognizant of that. Finally, I want to thank again AFEMA for putting this together. Thank you for bringing us together to also learn from one another. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Professor Getebe, for that presentation. It's really heartwarming to see the efforts that the Kenyan government is taking to advance e-mobility. We've seen the presentations from the continental perspective, and we can now understand a little bit more about what's been done locally through the national e-mobility policy and even the upcoming projects, which I think are going to be a good demonstration to other countries regionally, but also continentally, on how promotion of this value addition and local manufacturing can happen from a national to a regional perspective. So thank you once again for that presentation. And we have one more presenter, and that is Mamadou, Mr. Mamadou Ndiaye from CETUD. He's the e-mobility project manager. And Mamadou, are you available now for your next presentation?
Yes, do you hear me?
Yes, that's okay.
Okay, great.
Just a moment. I think Professor Detebe, you have to stop your screen share so that we can hand it over to Mamadou as well. Great.
Let me know when you all see my screen.
Yes, I can see it. Okay.
Do you see my screen?
Yes, let's go ahead.
Okay, great. Thanks, Warren, and thanks also to the Africa E-Mobility Alliance for the invitation. So my name is Mamadou Ndiaye. Actually, I'm a project technical coordinator in CETUD, leading all the e-mobility initiative actually here in CETUD in Senegal. For the background, I'm an electrical engineer. So I used to work in the past years in Europe, where I used to lead the e-mobility project for France, for Spain, and other European countries and so on. So I'm back lately in Senegal, working closer with CETUD to lead e-mobility program in Senegal. Do you see the other slide?
Yes, it's visible.
Okay, great. So for the context of the mobility here in Dakar, as you can see, Dakar is like a small city. 100 kilometers, and there is 50% of the country's urban population concentrated in Dakar, and there is more than 100,000 new inhabitants per year. And as you can see also, most of the trips here in Dakar are made by foot. More than 70% of trips made on foot on average day, and 80% of motorized trip made on public transport. So this is the, let's say, the general view on the urban mobility in Dakar. Like, as you can see, I just highlight the fact that there is rapid urban growth and imbalance in the distribution of the urban function. And the context about the transport and the emission here in Senegal. As you can see, the emission from the transport are like around 34% of the overall energy-related emission, making it the second largest source here in Dakar. So as you can see, it's one part that is very, causing a lot of damage on the ecosystem, pollution, so on. Rapidly expanding vehicle fleet, expected to triple in 20 and 30 years, which will increase energy and demand and emission. Aging and highly pollution fleet. So average age around 18 years for light vehicles and 24 years for buses. And the dependence also on imported used vehicles. I think like it's a topic that is very familiar in Africa, particularly in Senegal, which a lot of vehicles that we import, from Europe or from Asia, so on, they are imported used vehicle with a window of opportunity created by the ban on non-internal combustion engine in Europe. Like, as you can see in Europe, from 2035, there will be a ban from combustion engine. So actually, all these vehicles are going to, come here in Africa, in our countries, in Senegal. So favoring the arrival of electrical vehicle. The fuels also of insufficient quality, as the country still use the standard Euro 2.2, which is lower than regional standard. So as you can see here, the progression of the, let's say, of the emission, as we move years by years, we can see that the emission are really getting high. And for for the context of e-mobility in Senegal, as you know, Senegal had led the first BRT project. It's electrical bus. So now operating here in Senegal with a fleet of 121 fully electric buses already in operation, a first for the African continent. And there is a reason here in Senegal about a target of 37,000 electrical vehicles, a national goal backed by incentive measures to cut dependence on imported fossil fuels. So this was the study led by the Ministry of Transport in 2024, and by the target, we aim to have around 35,000 electrical vehicles. But also on the charging infrastructure, it is still limited. Actually, the coverage remained insufficient. Actually, you can see some charging infrastructure here in Dakar, and not more around when you go out Dakar, you can it's kind of hard to find electrical charging infrastructure. Sometimes you don't. So this caused a direct barrier to adoption that called for targeted investment. And also there is the restricted access to finance, a factor that makes it harder to launch and sustain electric mobility projects. So in this case, actually, Setud being the, let's say, technical executive for the Ministry of Transport, and by then I joined as a technical coordinator for all the e-mobility initiative. Here in Setud, we had the chance to get, let's say, to lead 3 initiatives like by Setud and also me as a technical coordinator. The first one is supporting the shift to the electric mobility in Senegal. So it's a project that was founded by Jeff, the UNEP, and also the scope. We have a pilot phase, so we gonna acquire, let's say, minibuses and charging infrastructure for the pilot phase. But this project is being let's say, around the topic of the regulatory framework. Also, everything related about the technical standard on the vehicle, the technical standard on the electrical charging infrastructure. That's all, everything related to the fiscality, the finance, and so on. So that's the main topic of the project. Here is the RTC. It's a project also being, let's say, financed by. We have the founder KFW, who just gave us, let's say, 5 million euros to acquire standard bus and charging infrastructure for the pilot phase. But this is a project also to help build massive infrastructure on the transport to help, let's say, get new way of transport here in Dakar and also on the other region. And the last one is LEAP. LEAP is a project that just started, by and founded by GIZ and the AKI. So this is also about the regulatory framework on the e-mobility, but also the main topic is on the think tank accelerator. So as you can see, Setud's role is to ensure cross-cutting technical coordination among funders, GIF, KFW, GIZ, to avoid duplication between initiatives and drive unfilled national e-mobility governance. So actually through building, let's say, a national committee to lead all this project. Actually in Senegal, There is settled leading in program, but also you can find it on other institution. So they might receive some, let's say, some investment from the founders, and they want also to lead some program, but making sure to have national committee will help us, let's say, get all the initiative on the same table and lead it by the same time. So we're gonna avoid the duplication between initiatives. So to go deeper on the point about the program, LEAP. So LEAP is founding and overall objective. So the funding is by the donor is the International Climate Initiative, IKI, the German government, and implementation by GIZ and the National Partner Institute, and the allocated budget is 1 million euros for Institute. But the global project is about around 14 million euros. So it's with Kenya, South Africa, and Senegal. So the objective are to support the transition to zero emission road transport in Senegal and also other countries like Kenya and South Africa by strengthening the policy, the regulatory and institutional framework for e-mobility while fostering jobs creation, women's inclusion, and regional integration. So these are the main objectives about LIPS. And the project is being led by Setud in collaboration with GIZ and the Ministry of Land and Air Transport. So the Setud will coordinate national activities, stakeholder dialogue, and technical support to promote the development of electric mobility and low carbon transport system. So to highlight also the component of the project, overreaching e-mobility framework by technical studies, regulatory support, EV industrial strategy, women inclusion by skill buildings, professional network, entrepreneurial initiatives, think tank and accelerator, support the African think tank studies, policy brief, exchange platform, the regional harmonization around ECOWAS, common standards across ECOWAS, cooperation platforms, FMA, TAPS, and also the last one is around the international cooperation, showcasing Senegal's experiences on the future. So the second one is supporting the shift into electrical mobility in Senegal. So it's a strategy for developing electric mobility nationally, reducing pollution, enhancing social equity, and improving the urban transport system sustainability, and has been outlined. So the main component on the project are 5. So to enable a framework for integrating e-mobility system, removing short-term barriers through a demonstration pilot phase, scaling up and replicating integrated system. When we almost done with the pilot phase, we will get, let's say, real information and real data to scale up and replicate into integrated system. We have also a component that is around long-term environment sustainability, about EV and battery end of life. And also the last component is about monitoring and evaluation. So the RTC, the electric bus pilot by KfW, as you can see, it's the pilot complement the electrical BRT already in services and feeds shared learning with regional partners. So the purpose also is to have electrical bus, through Dakar in parallel with the BRT, and to help also, let's say, get people into the BRT. And whenever the people want to go take the BRT on let's say they arrive and they want to take, let's say, secondary bus, so it will be electrical bus, like so that's why we have the RTC. And also there is biogas, also bus that take also natural gas. So the main project of the RTC is around that.
you want to do? Okay. Well, great. Thank you for the perspectives, Mamadou. It is really great to also understand a little bit more about what's happening across in Senegal and the projects that are coming up and how this might go towards promoting industrialization and value chain advancement in Senegal and for e-mobility, particularly on the continent. I think this also is an opportunity to see how Senegal can play a bigger role in regional value chains, particularly in the ECOWAS region. And now for all the questions that have come up during the course of this conversation will now be addressed during this Q&A segment that will happen next. We are 9 minutes out from our finish time, but I'll request that we stay on for an additional up to 15 minutes, just so that we can get to hear some of your questions responded to, and then wrap up the session a little bit over the 12:30 mark. So please stay on for an additional 15 minutes as just above our initial planned finish time. Cynthia from GIZ Kenya will be moderating this next session with the Q&A. So Cynthia, please take it away. I think there's a lot of questions that have already come, but yeah, please take it away. We have about 15 or so minutes to go through this next segment before we start the concluding remarks.
Okay, thank you, Warren. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much to the speakers for those insightful presentations. I'm sure everyone agrees that they have found it valuable in terms of the perspectives and what is needed to build the regional value chains in Africa. So I'll just dive into the Q&A. So for those who are yet to submit their Q&A, please do so in the Q&A chat. As of now, we have received a few questions here, so I'll just get into it. There is a question from Andrew Kamanu. How is the Samurai bond going to be utilized to support local manufacturing as opposed to just financing import of fully built EV units? I'll direct that question to Professor Gatebe.
Thank you, Cynthia. Thank you all. Let me be clear. The Samurai bond, which is basically what I said is 13.1 billion Kenya shilling. Most of the resources is going to help those people who are entering or who are in manufacturing, part manufacturing, and also to transition those who are already in the auto sector. Those who want to move from the current arrangements and then they want to move to the new arrangement, and more so in terms of age. If you look at the Kenyan standard, we allow up to 8 years. So we also in the regulations, and we have done those regulations, we have amended them. There's yet to be implemented completely. We are proposing to move from 8 years to 5 gradually to 0. And that is one way we are going to have that. So Samurai board is going to be, it's an open check for those who are in the sector. They will apply. The State Department just constituted a team and they will be required to apply. And then, of course, there will be verification, and then you'll be awarded. We have both the grant and soft loan with a very low, much lower interest rate, less than it's less than the bank rate, probably between 4 and 9 around there. So we are looking at a very affordable rate so that you can be able to transition. So it is not to substitute import substitution. No, nothing in that budget I submit.
Thank you, Professor Gatebe. On to the next question. There is a question from Cyrus Wekesa. He asks, what about competitiveness when it comes to local manufacturing? Consider that China can produce some of the things at a fraction of the cost. I'll direct this question to Robert Njoroge, given your introduction and scene setting.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Wekesa. Yes, indeed, mature markets like China are able to produce components at, I won't say fraction, but I'll say at a lower cost. However, this is where regional policies and frameworks in countries as well as within the African Union level can be able to protect us as a market. For example, we can have policies that promote and reduce duties and taxes applied on locally assembled products within regions, and also sort of leverage and actually, I don't want to use the word increase, but obviously it would be to increase what is coming out of the region to protect the market. This is something that if you look at countries like the US has done, maybe to protect their own market. So that's a way in which we can protect our market as Africa, by using policy to sort of enhance. But also in a way, policy also has a threshold in that we also need to figure out how to reduce the cost. So actively looking into reducing the tariff in terms of power that is consumed in manufacturing. That's one area. And also looking at skilling more people so that we create more skills and more a larger pool of experts who are able to competitively assemble and manufacture. Yeah.
Thank you, Robert. On to the next question from Andres Ali. Africa as a continent has huge opportunities for energy transition, but at the same time, we also face many obstacles. My question is, how can we tackle these challenges at a continental level? I'll address this question to Engineer Eric. Engineer Eric, are you with us or he's dropped off? Okay. Looks like he has dropped off. So I'll again come back to you, Robert, on this.
Okay. I think Cynthia, you can just please repeat the question.
Okay, so it's how can we tackle challenges at a continental level in terms, we have the opportunities, but we also have the challenges. So how can we go about these challenges?
Okay, so let's pick one. Policy challenges in terms of differences in policies, standards, limited demand, and duplicated investments. So one is to focus rather on regional policies as opposed to national policies, have more conversations at a regional level, regionally like the EAC level, ECOWAS level, SADC level, and also use the same strength to focus on the AU levels. And also something that Engineer Eric at the AU level mentioned about the Africa Free Trade Continental Agreement is to implement that particular document and ensure that there's harmonization also of standards. That's also another way in which we can solve these challenges. Then on the demand side, basically also I'll still stick to policy, leveraging policy to be able to create demand in different markets. As I had mentioned, if a particular country has been identified to be a key assembler or manufacturer of light-duty vehicles, there's no need to duplicate efforts. It's just to create markets in another particular jurisdiction and complement that with another market which can be able to produce, let's say, charging infrastructure or electric two and three-wheelers.
Thank you, Robert. And the second last question from Caroline Richardson. While e-mobility vehicles offer up to 80% operating cost reductions, the reality is that ICE vehicles still cost way less upfront. So how will Africa lower e-mobility vehicle costs when assembling locally? I'll pose this question to Mamadou.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, sorry, can you repeat, please? The connection was cut.
Okay, so the question is, how can we offer lower upfront costs for e-mobility vehicles, given that the reality is ICE vehicles cost way less upfront?
Okay, so from my point of view, if we want the e-mobility, I mean the e-vehicles to progress more and more in Africa, the government should help support the taxes on the importation of the vehicles to build also green, let's say the green taxonomy to help local the private sector on. I mean, we have something that we call tax. I mean, tax exoneration. So I think this part will help a lot. Tax exemption. Sorry, just lost the word. So this part will help also the private sector to involve. The second thing is the government also need to take decision as if we see the example in Ethiopia, so they just ban IEC importation because actually they found out that on the energy side they have the capacity to produce more energy in yeah. So I think that will the main decision will come from, let's say, the government to let's say to ban importation and also to build the ecosystem and to help the private sector involved by the green taxonomy and exemption of the taxes when we import electrical vehicles, and to build also the ecosystem and making sure the standard of the EV charging infrastructure are being well respected. So I don't know if it's clear for you.
Thank you. Yeah, that's sufficient. On to the last question. I think this question is both to the panelists and also to the audience. From John Misingo, the plan is great and very timely. Has anyone done a study of the effects of having fully built units across countries on the grid development? Looking at this as a purely industrial conversation, in my view, it misses the really big opportunity or challenge that can come from the effects of e-mobility on our grids. So I feel like that's also an open question, but at the same time, I think I will pose that to Robert to just maybe expound on it a bit.
Yeah, Cynthia, please repeat the question. I was looking for it in the chat.
Okay, so
the first part only.
So the question is on the impacts of fully built units and grid development. So he says the plan is great and very timely. Has anyone done a study of the effects of having fully built units across countries on the grid development? Looking at this as a purely industrial conversation, in my view, it misses the really big opportunity or challenge that can come from the effects of e-mobility on our grids.
Okay, so that question has two parts, one on the industrial bit, in that as we promote industrialization, there's a lot of grid capacity that needs to be increased, in that we'll consume more power. But also, if I may circle back into how a lot of investments happens and how also the utilities plan. So is it in terms of demand and supply? So do you supply power, then you expect people to come and create investments, or you create investments, then the utility will produce power to power these particular industries. So in terms of that particular grid analysis, I'd say in Kenya, for industrialization, the studies haven't been carried out. However, studies on charging infrastructure, which is the second part of that question, have been carried out. But in a way, if I may use the example of Kenya, in terms of industrialization, Kenya has a bold plan to get to 5 gigawatts total installed capacity. However, we do not have the demand for, we don't have enough demand to be able to consume that 5 gigawatts. So that shows you that the conversation is timely, because this is one area where we can be able to consume this power, in that when the utility is planning to inject 5 gigawatts, already there's an off-taker. So I do agree with you, John, that study needs to be done. However, we need also to create this demand, because at the end of the day, we're trying to grow our economies, we're trying to industrialize. We shouldn't also be left back in conversations of, are we ready or not? There's no time that you'll ever be ready. If you look at China and all the industrialized countries, they created the demand, they created the favorable enabling environments, and they were able to move as the market demands. So if right now there's a lot of energy consumption by the industry and by charging infrastructure, believe you me, the utilities will step up, because it would mean more business for them. And I can confidently mention that private investors, especially in the energy space, are willing to put up generating plants in the continent to be able also for them to make money. So there are a lot of independent power producers who are ready. The only thing that they need is a favorable environment, a business case to show that there's enough demand for this energy in the continent. I did present the abundant renewable energy potential that we have in hydro, in geothermal, in solar. So setting up, for example, hydro plants to consume this power that's going to be used in industrialization in the automotive space, I think it's a good investment. So let's create an enabling environment, create the demand, the utilities will adjust.
Thank you, Robert, for that. And now on to the last question for real. So Rolex Mseka has put in a question on BRT in Senegal. So he asks, for the BRT in Senegal, are the BRT buses manufactured locally, or parts are assembled and imported locally? Is there a monitoring, reporting, and verification system developed for the BRT system in Senegal for the NDC tracking and reporting? I feel like these are two questions packed into one, but I believe Mamadou, you'll be able to tackle both of them. Okay, looks like Mamadou has dropped off. Yeah, so unfortunately, the question will remain unanswered, but Rolex, feel free to approach Mamadou through LinkedIn on this and interact with him further. So at this point, I'll take it back to Warren to continue with the webinar. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Cynthia, for hosting that Q&A session. We still have the pending questions, and I'm sure there might be more questions that have already continued to come. Now, what we could do as well is we'll be happy to receive these questions and pass it on to this panel, the speakers for today, and they can also put back their responses as we share the presentations from today's call. So thanks again, Cynthia, for that. And thank you to the panelists who've been so valuable in their knowledge and experiences and perspectives to bring some light in this conversation on local value chains and manufacturing for Africa. In conclusion, and I see we're 5 minutes out, I have 3 main takeaways from this discussion. The first one is that we are at the start and should not wait at the start. The last 100 years of the automotive industry have, for Africa, brought us to a point where we're at about 73 vehicles per 1,000 of population compared to a world average of 200 to 300. We have ended up in a situation where we have used vehicle imports as the majority of imports into the continent. And we still are heavily dependent on fossil fuel imports for the transport sector, which results in massive amounts of emissions. The next 100 do not have to be the same. At this point, though, policies for e-mobilities are still young. We are just at the start. Investments are increasing and emerging, and costs realistically are high, but they don't have to be so because we are at the start. The good thing is that the momentum is there and it's visible, right from the number of companies established across the continent, to the AEW framework, which is now official and live, to the national experiences that we've had. The momentum is there and we should take advantage of it. Renewable energy exists on the continent, and this can be a great source of energy for powering e-mobility. So Africa is not an isolated continent. It sits in the global dynamic today. Africa can learn a lot of lessons from back home, from home. We have our neighbors, we have countries that have already gotten started with policy implementation and commitments towards e-mobility, but we also have global partners from Europe, in China, Southeast Asia, we have India, all of which have contributed already to the growth of e-mobility in Africa through vehicle importation, charging infrastructure flowing into the continent. So partnerships and investment flows will inevitably happen within Africa and from outside Africa. So we should bear in mind that Africa can attract these investments and push towards global competitiveness, as had been presented by my colleague Robert, that there are 3 stages. We are in the adoption phase. There is an starting and an upcoming industrialization phase, and then there'll be a global competitiveness phase. So all of these have slightly different requirements, but already there is proof that e-mobility is a workable solution for the continent. So thank you once again to all the speakers that have shared all this knowledge. Thank you to the attendees. And with this, I would like to segue to the notice that the conversation on local manufacturing and e-mobility is going to continue at the Africa E-Mobility Weekend Forum 2026 in Cape Town this September 28th to 30th. Our great partners are United Nations Environment Programme, and Africa Union, the Economic Commission for Africa, and AFEMA are all working towards ensuring that you have a great experience, but you also meet the stakeholders that are truly shaping this continent's progress towards e-mobility. So please join us, save the date, contact us if you'd like more information on this. And we hope to see you in September for the Africa E-Mobility Week 2026. Thank you all to the attendees that you've You've been a great audience. You've engaged us and given a lot of food for thought from this conversation. We hope that this is not just a conversation, but it's actually a demonstration of action that will go beyond today's webinar into the policy steps that will happen both in your respective countries, but also regionally and continentally. Thank you all for attending this webinar, and I wish you a great rest of the day. Thank you. Bye-bye.